I don't think people really know the true hypnotic power of television. How it pulls us in and just keeps telling us to consume, buy, and tells us to hate each other and separates us and causes the greatest divides, all under the name of entertainment.
Here we are.
And every time I turn on my TV, it's just like no surprise. It's all those programs and they're pushing out lies. And in between there's the adverts and they do it again. And they're trying to convince us that we're friends and have us trained like good little soldiers. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, everybody. It's $1 trillion. Number one tonight. Well, yeah, tonight's going to be a good show. I'm going to go live. Hey, I'm the OBG, and welcome to tonight's Sunday show, December the 29th, 2019. And I've got a really special show lined up for tonight. Chris Paradox is going to pop in to have a chat, kind of sort of interview chat, chat-a-view. Who knows? But hello, Paul. Hello, Kai. And, that should be good. I thought I was chatty, but Chris is a man of words. He's a beat poet, amongst many other things. But rather than me try to give him labels, I'll let him speak for himself a little later on in the show. So I'm going to kick straight off. Hello, Martin, executive producer Martin. I'm going to kick straight off with tonight's show, and I'll get Chris on round about 8:15. Hello, Keith. So, yeah, you made it this week. That's cool. I'm not going to go right off. I'll just wait a little while. Hi there, Chris. On standby for the 8:15. So I'm going to go straight off. I've got a few people in already. And as you know, I take segments out and I save them for the show afterwards. So let's do this. Hi, I'm the OBG, and I've been living free from the constraints of time recently, but for those of you that compartmentalise everything annually, 2019 was a really good year and a continuation of the journey. And I'm not going to lie, it's been really hard work, real hard work, but I also played hard, because if some of you know, Valencia is amazing in the summer, and nobody really works during the summer. I mean, people work, but the Valencians tend to take a month off for holiday, shop shut and so on, and it's got a really nice laid-back vibe. And in fact, it's too hot to work and quite dry. But I managed to skate all summer, and I managed to meet hundreds of people, and I mean hundreds of people. And I have, managed to strike up a few new friendships and made many acquaintances. And I made sure that this year I wanted to have like a deeper understanding. I'm not talking about voyeurism and, being privileged and taken advantage, but I spent a lot of time this year with homeless people. And I made a really good friend of an Englishman called Gary. He sometimes logs in, actually. He's got himself a mobile phone, and he's moved to Alicante, but we're still in touch, and he's going to come visit me soon. And I spent a lot of time with them, got to know how they worked, how they operated, the places where they used to go and eat and so on. And, I was trying to find a way maybe to help them, but I couldn't offer more than sit with them most days, all day, in fact, and talk and, share a lot with myself. But I've got to say, during all that time, I was always planning, reading, writing, researching, and learning how to use the software for the show, learning how to use the camera, and all I could about lighting, and all that I could learn about presenting. Now, with the presenting, I didn't actually go and take a course or anything like that, but just practice, and kept looking at myself until I was satisfied. And to be honest, I never was totally satisfied. I thought, when I get this right, then I'll start presenting. And I thought, no, you know what? Just go out, start presenting anyway, and you'll improve as you go along, and especially as you'll have feedback rather than sitting at home doing it. And I have to say, I also learned the majority of the things that I spoke about during my lifetime, so it wasn't really a steep learning curve. And I also recommend everybody keep learning and taking on new projects or hobbies as a mind expansion, expansion of the mind. And also, you never know when it's going to actually come in handy. Anyway, this was a challenge for a project that I set out to do the year before, and along with some support from my friends on Facebook and influences outside of Facebook, I managed to reach a target. So 2020 will be a continuation of the same, in which I intend to promote the show and have it seen further afield. So I've not reached my major target yet, which is to interview Edward Snowden in 2 years' time, and I have no idea of how successful that will be. But I thought I'd share the journey so far, and hopefully can bring you a presentation of the future success. And now for the yang. For those of you that think that you have not been successful or that success doesn't come to you because you're unlucky, I really believe that the majority of you are simply lazy or simply have a real basic plan. Because many people, they actually believe that they go to the bank, get a loan from their parents, find a location, start business and make some money. Or that they have a great song, a poem, a short story, and that they're armed for success. But business or success isn't like that. If you start off with lots of money, it kind of makes things a little bit easier, but it doesn't make you make the right choices, and it doesn't make you work any harder. And there's also those issues that you have to deal with working in a business or even as yourself, and those obstacles present themselves as you go, as you go along. And if you're selling your talent, you really have to be confident of you as a product. And many people don't actually learn about their businesses. They do simple calculations such as I buy 100 t-shirts for £3 and sell them for £10, or I sell this song and I'll be wealthy. And it doesn't work that way in the main. There's overheads, obstacles, and anything else that you can imagine out there. And it's your ability to work hard, which is the most important thing. You often have to change your game, cut down on the partying, or even knock it on the head, change the way you view things, especially yourself, and concentrate on the business. And whenever an obstacle presents itself, you have to first decide what that obstacle is, understand it, and then formulate a plan to overcome it. And then you can move ahead. Educate yourself. Stop living behind your avatar. Your false image runs out of steam at some point, and you can't create your success immediately. Your success lays in the future, and you have to work towards it. But all the same, and I mean it, I wish you all the best. You're just going to have a larger head than me, but
okay.
That's cool.
Well, I'm a bit of a big head, so there you go.
Okay, superb. Right, so everyone, this is Chris Paradox. I was just going to ask the tough questions, and so on. I decided we had a little chat on the phone, and I think we'll just talk. And I'll throw some questions in, and as I said earlier, it's going to be an interview chat, a chat interview. So it's a chat of you, okay? So first of all, thanks for making the time, Chris, and welcome to the show.
Okay, yeah, my name's Chris Paradox. I'm a London boy, originally from Muswell Hill and Frame Barnet, and 52 years old. Feel like a beauty contest contestant. 34, 26, 35. I wish. What do I do? I've been when I was 35, I gave up a career in advertising and went to live under a tree in a park, Battersea Park, for 7 months, and sold the big issue and became a poet in the park, and then was a performance poet from 2002, basically up until now. But in 2009, jumped off a cliff into a river in Mexico while part of a horse caravan cowboy circus. Smash up my leg there, as my dad would say.
Christ.
And had my leg amputated, had an amazing adventure. Best thing that ever happened to me, going to live in the park was the dumbest thing I ever did and the wisest thing I ever did. Losing my leg was the worst thing that ever happened to me and the best thing that happened to me, hence the name Paradox. My whole life is a big, massive paradox. And sort of found myself in the park and then refound myself when I lost my leg. And then about 2 years ago, I had 3 is the magic number. I had my third dark night of the soul that led to my third major awakening. And the last awakening led me into a path of practice and service where I just basically dedicated my life to becoming an extension of God's love, and just allowing what I understand as God's love, or you might understand as just unconditional love or divine love or universal love. I understand myself, in fact all human beings, but certainly myself, to be an instrument of divine love, and that's my purpose on this planet, is to extend divine love to all beings in any way that I can in the moment. So, and I do that. That's pretty much what I do now.
Okay, excellent. And when you use the term God, because I find some people get put off by the term, you say God and they...
You don't say...
Yeah, and they immediately imagine Christians, Catholics burning people and so on. So you use the term God. Could you just go a little on that and how you mean it?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, normally I actually avoid using it for the very reason that you give. But the thing about God is you can only know God by being God, by allowing God into your being. So all ideas of God that were written down, all ideas or beliefs about God, they have nothing to do with God as far as I'm concerned. If there is an all-powerful being that's omniscient and omnipotent, that being must be everything. It must be everything that exists. If that being is everything that exists, then everything must be it. So the sun must be part of God, I must be part of God, everything must be God. Creation is made of God. There is nothing separate to God, and there is nothing that is not God. That is the God that I understand. Okay, the God that is all that is.
Fantastic. I hold a very similar view. In fact, I've always said that. Took some searching, in a sense of, I've always been quite an individual in my mind, doing my own thing. So I thought I can't accept God in the way that other people tried to throw it at me and tell me it was, or authority. And I thought, how can this person be an authority and tell me that this authority is over mine? Yeah. And I looked inward, and I was an odd kid, I just say, God's inside me and stuff like that. Oh, you think you're God, you'd hear. But in the end, very much like you said, we're all part of it, it's part of us and so on, but it's not written down, it's not a man in a cloth telling you to give him money and, to believe in his God. Also, let me just move on to the next one. You actually referred to as the one-legged existentialist stand-up beat poet and inspiration engineer, and it's a term that's been attributed to you. And how did that come about, and do you still use that moniker?
Well done for remembering it. Normally when I ask people to introduce me like that, they forget the word, so well done. One-legged existentialist stand-up beat poet. The one-legged bit obviously is because I lost my leg in 2008, as I said. Existentialist, everything I do creatively is about what it means to be. So what it means to be human, what it means to be alive, what it means to be in relationship, what it means to be. So that's existential for me. Stand up, my poetry is full of comedy. I like to keep things light as well as dark, or light as well as deep, as you do yourself. And the beat poetry my poetry is very rhythmic. Yes, it has its own rhythm, and it works well with music, but actually it doesn't need music because it's so musical in itself. So one-legged existentialist stand-up beat poet.
Superb. And you did mention about the accident that happened in Mexico as well. Would you be able to go into some detail on that? Not on the actual accident itself, unless you want to, but more about how you managed to deal or to cope during and afterwards.
Okay, I won't go into the detail of the accident because it would take too much time. But what I can say is that I've always been a fan of Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. Okay. And Viktor Frankl talked about the fact that he was in a concentration camp during the Second World War, and he used his psychological training to observe what happens to human beings in that most extreme nightmarish situation. Yes. And he developed a theory called logotherapy, which they call the third school of Viennese psychotherapy, which basically said man's deepest need is for meaning. And he described something that he called our one true freedom. And this is the only freedom that can't be taken away from us under any conditions. And it's basically your attitude. Okay. Because he noticed there were people in the concentration camp putting on cabaret shows, yes, nursing other people, giving people their food. So even though they knew they were going to die, their attitude was, I'm going to die with dignity. I'm going to die being a good person. And no one can ever take that away from you. And that actually is your greatest power in life, to decide what type of person you want to be. Okay. And so when I lost, and I also was always fascinated by disabled people who were happy. I know it sounds silly, but whenever I saw people in wheelchairs who were smiling and laughing, I always thought, that is the human spirit. That, what they have, that is the human spirit. I want to know about that. So I've always been fascinated with people who overcome tragedy and terrible things happening to them. Okay. Stories of mothers who forgive the killers of their children. Yes. I always was like, that is the human spirit. How do they do that? What is that about? So anyway, when I jumped off the cliff and when I climbed out, when they dragged me out the river, I had a big hole punched in my heel. The rock had smashed a hole in my heel and smashed my leg and everything. And I remember I was lying there on the beach and a couple of people fainted and people were like, freaking out. And I remember that for a couple of seconds, the voice of what I call my mental patient, which is the voice in the head that never shuts up.
Something I'll come to later, by the way, yes.
We'll come to that, yeah. So that voice did what you would imagine it did, which is, oh my God, what's happened to me? Am I crazy? What's going to happen? Am I going to die? Da, 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 panic, fear, what have you. But after a couple of seconds, it was as if something pressed the mute button on that voice, and it just muted it. But I could literally hear it very, 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 very tiny in the background, but it just been muted, and it was replaced with a mighty presence. That's the best way I can say it. My body filled with this mighty presence, and this mighty presence thought the whole situation of me having this accident was hilarious.
Wow.
And I just started cracking jokes about my situation to everyone, and I was totally fine. And the way I describe it is that this mighty presence didn't give a shit about me. Is it okay for me to swear?
Go ahead.
Yeah, this mighty presence didn't give a shit about little me, separate me, ego me, the self-image me. It didn't give a shit about that part of me, yet at the same time, it loved me unconditionally.
Wow, what a paradox.
So, what a paradox, exactly. So I felt this unconditional love of the universe, while at the same time, whatever my, I'm worried, it was just like, fuck. It just didn't care about that part of me. It just gave me this incredible sense of peace and love. And that really helped me through the 11-day journey where these three amazing women, girls who were on the caravan with me, Megan, Pachan, and Sulla. Shout out Megan, Pachan, and Sulla. Love you. Basically saved my life and took me to the hospital and sent an email to my friends in London who raised £8,000 because I didn't have holiday insurance. And it was this whole adventure, and during this whole adventure, it was kind of the best 11 days of my life because there was so much love. My heart just burst open for Megan, Pachan, and Sulla, and all these people that sent me money and sent me prayers and wishes, and I was completely helpless. I couldn't do anything. So all I had was this mighty presence and all of the love and support of all the people who helped me. So it just kind of opened me up in a way that I can't really describe, but it just made me feel basically one with everyone.
Part of the next question that leads me to is your character. I believe that you formed a lot of it prior to the accident. But as you said, that experience that you had where you felt your mental patient and so on, do you think it took the accident to form you into who you are? I know it's part of it, but would I be able to accuse you of saying, oh, you look at life this way because of your accident? Or do you think...
Yeah, so
that before?
So that last bit again?
Do you think it was pretty much that before?
So it was kind of in stages. So the park was the first forming of me. That was my first awakening. So Paradox the poet was born in the park. I was 35. I'd never written a poem in my life. And when I started selling the big issue, I sold the big issue like a performer. And so I became a performer selling the big issue. And then 3 months into the park, I started doing poetry and I put them together, open mics, started having a career as a performance poet. So that was the first part of me. And in the park, I was a nature mystic. Squirrels used to follow me around. I used to talk to the birds. I used to be with the stars because I lived in a park for 7 months. So I was in nature the whole time. So I was kind of like a nature mystic in the park. But I was like a baby. It was like being newborn. I was very innocent and everything was very simple.
Yes.
And then I had the next 6 years after that where I became an activist and I ran with a whole crew of anarchists and artists and activists, putting on shows, doing I was all about the money system, so I used to go in banks and tell everyone how the money system works and all that kind of stuff. And because of that, my ego got back in the back door.
Okay.
So where I was innocent in the park,
yes,
in the years after the park, I had an identity. I was popular, I had this identity and role to play. And so I lost my innocence.
yes.
But when I lost my leg, I got my innocence back again because, again, I was helpless. All these beautiful people helped me. So it was a humbling, it was a humbling. And that's one thing I would always say is that humiliation is bad for the ego, but good for the soul. The soul doesn't mind you being humiliated. The soul doesn't mind you being humbled. The ego does. So it was humbling in a good way. And so I was reborn again, but maybe as a teenager. So the park, I was a toddler. The leg, maybe a teenager. And the most recent crash and burn, maybe a man.
Superb. Okay, so it seems that you are the person still in control. In that these things didn't just happen to you, and and so therefore they turned you into this. You made best of whatever situation that you were put in. Now, I saw something on one of your posts recently, which this is what it leads me to. You talked about victims. It's something that I talk about a lot sometimes. Sometimes I talk about always, in fact. That you said, let me say the way I explain it first, that victimhood. People always kind of feel that they're the victim, and they express that. And to me, it seems more like an appeal to emotion more than anything else. And I'm not having a go at those who are true victims, like beyond every form of help. But in the majority, people tend to, for me, claim, it's because I'm black, it's because I'm fat, it's because I'm, whatever it is. And you wrote some words around that topic. Can you speak to us a little about that?
Yeah. So for me, it's all about identity. Everything in life, the deepest level, if you want to change your reality, you can change it at the level of thought, you can change it at the level of behavior, you can change it at a deeper level, which is values. That's the deepest one most people go to, changing their values. But actually underneath that's identity. Who am I? It's the ultimate question. Who am I really? Now, if you say, let's say, for instance, because the discussion was about rape and abuse. If you were raped, then you were a victim of rape, definitely. That is going to cause trauma, that is going to cause emotional problems, and you should be supported in your healing. You should definitely be allowed to express your pain and rage, yes. But where it stops for me is when you say, instead of saying I was a victim of rape, is when you say I am a victim of rape. Because you are taking an event and you are building an identity around an event in the past. So you are literally, rather than saying I was a victim of rape, however, I have the power of responsibility to heal myself so that the rape, the event, doesn't ruin or affect my whole life. There are people who have been raped, who have gone through the difficult process of healing. It might take a long time, but they've taken responsibility for how they feel after the rape, and they have healed themselves. Okay. That is what I encourage everyone to do. But when you say, I am a victim of rape, or I am a victim of racism, rather than I was a victim of racism, you disempower yourself completely, because victims have no power, because they don't take responsibility. The ability to respond is your power. So when you don't take responsibility, when you put the blame or the responsibility onto someone else, you disempower yourself, so you can't heal. So what I say to people who identify as victims is, don't identify as a victim. Identify the fact that you were a victim, but now choose to take responsibility for your healing. Empower yourself by recognizing that it doesn't help you to blame anyone. It doesn't help.
Well worded, and it's very, I can't see anyone who would want to disagree with that, although some will still, because this is the way I hold my views. I'm a bit more tougher in my approach. I've learned to be a bit more tactful as I've got older, but I'm a kind of get over it guy, but not, just solid, just stop. But I always knew the answer, not from the earliest stage, but very quickly. And some people say, but you're an older man, so therefore, you would. I say, no. You don't just get old and suddenly you have knowledge. You have to learn along the way. And I'm the same in the sense of, I used to always say to people, it's like, it's already happened. So now you have to work towards healing, because, and I use different wording to you, but it's exactly the same, meaning. And I'd say to them, well, it's already happened. So now you have to work towards getting better. And some people listen, and those people who do listen, if you can get through to them, they heal. They start healing. You may not be the last person, because another analogy I use is that, we may have, I'll use a number, I don't cap numbers and say, oh, the 3 steps to happiness or 7. But imagine you're on a ladder with 10 steps. That person meeting you, Chris Paradox, you may be the first person they've met. So if you tell them to stop drinking so much, they won't quit. But when they meet the 10th person, which could be you, could be me, then that's the key. That's not that you're the most important, equally important as everyone else. And when those people do listen, then they heal. But most people, as you said, they become the victim, and it becomes who they are rather than the event that actually happened to them. Also, I just want to step back a little. Just going to need a moment, because we talked about existentialism, which is something that I've studied, and some of the viewers may not actually know what that is. So briefly, it's a philosophical inquiry which was attributed to Jean-Paul Sartre and also Heidegger and a couple of other players. And it's a doctrine that we form our presence on our journey through life by personal choices, with a focus on creating our own nature, including our personal freedom, making our own decisions, along with a commitment to them. And this is what I allude to often in my shows when I talk about me being self-determined. And it's not about being smart. If I talk at that level, sometimes some people don't understand, or, they say, you think you're an intellectual. And I find I have ability to break those things down, and hopefully they can help other people to understand. So thank you for the pause there, Chris. And also, by coincidence, I found out that we both spoke about being spiritual last week. It may have even been on the same day. And I didn't check the dates and times, but I think we had a cosmic connection. So it was a kind of, when I say negative, it wasn't positive anyway, but it was about people not being able to buy spiritualism in a nutshell. So can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I did a post the other day which I've come to a place, an interesting place, where I see most of human behavior as unconscious, like most of our behavior, because I've just observed myself for long enough to realize that most of the time I'm just running on scripts and patterns. And when I'm not present here now, that part of my mind that just thinks by itself, non-stop, and that part of my emotional being that gets triggered and upset by things it doesn't like, or things it likes not happening, these things are basically running me.
Okay.
I call them the wounded child and the monkey mind. And when I look at the world, it's just really obvious to me, and I call those two things together. Jamie Catto, an old friend of mine, has a wonderful saying: we're all a wise guru in charge of a mental patient. Okay, yeah. Which to me certainly sums up myself and pretty much everyone I know, and most people certainly people who take responsibility agree with it. Yes. Obviously, if you see yourself as a victim of the Illuminati or the Tories or white people or men, or if you see yourself as a victim, if you're part of the identity politics brigade who encourage people to see themselves as victims, then you probably won't agree that you are your own worst enemy. But most adults who have lived life know that it's their crazy thoughts and their justifications and their bullshit, basically.
A lot of that's basically denial as well. That's part of
denial, yeah.
Analysis of the mind and so on.
Yeah, and their inability to control their emotions. Like, we get emotional, we get triggered, and we do and say stupid things. And we do and say things that get us into trouble, that ruin relationships, yes, that hurt our family. You know what I mean? We all do it all the time. And I call that the mental patient. However, the thing that we don't talk about is the fact that we also have a deep wisdom and a deep awareness and a deep knowing and a deep creativity and a deep spontaneity and a deep ability to connect, yes, with people and nature and what have you. And that I call the wise guru. Excellent. And for me, when you look at the world, all the problems of humanity are due to the way human beings are. The world is the way it is because people are the way people are. And people are the way people are because the wise guru is asleep at the wheel, because the mental patient is running us. We're being run by our monkey minds, and we're being run by our wounded children. Okay. So for me...
Look, can I just interject on that? Sorry. So as far as you say we're being run by it, also, this is sometimes when people talk about the Illuminati and so on. I had a little journey down there as well. But, as an investigator...
Yeah, me too.
So, and some of it I believed and took on board, held on to it maybe a little longer than I should have. But when we say we're the monkey mind or the guru's in control, who's driving that? Is it for us as individuals to try and work that out, or do you believe there is actually some greater force at play, or a collective of people who are making that happen, or is it us just allowing it to happen, for example, by being consumers? Is it that mind that just wants to grab?
I think it's a combination of both. On the Illuminati thing, it's best to keep it simple so that people don't accuse you of talking about conspiracies. If you look at the whole of human history, up until about 100 years ago, it was absolutely clear to everybody that the world was run by a very small number of people that we called kings, emperors, popes. That's how the world has always been. A few rich aristocratic families ran every country, whether it was in the feudal system or prior to that. And then capitalism came along, the Industrial Revolution, and we had the robber barons. Yeah. And in Europe, we had the Age of Revolutions, the French Revolution, and America, etc., the English Civil War. And then we started to create democracies as we understand them. However, the democracies, the only people who could vote initially were landed gentry, and women couldn't vote until very recently. So we have this idea that the world changed from being run by a plutocracy or an oligarchy, and all of a sudden it became like power of the people. Like, never in the history of the world have the rich and powerful given their power away. Right. So let's just be honest, it's still run by the rich and powerful. Yes. Whatever you want to call them, it doesn't matter. Anyone who's has any sense knows that both of the American and British political systems are controlled by big money, whether it's big corporation, military industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, the 0.01%. So there is that. And they have set up a world, quite obviously, meant to keep us consuming and producing. That's what they want. That's what the school system is set up for. Everything's set up to get us consuming, buying, spending money, and working to produce the goods. Okay. That's pretty clear. And in order to keep us doing that, they have to keep our knowledge of who we really are as secret as possible. So the world is...
Yeah, this is one of the things that most people, in my experience, find very hard to take on board. When you say that to them, you say, look, regardless who you believe who's running it, we don't know. We don't know the names or, addresses of these people.
It doesn't matter.
In order to maintain it, they have to keep some knowledge from us. So we think we live in this tiny world. And as I'm agreeing with you, sorry, carry on.
The biggest threat to the status quo, I don't know who said it, but someone famous said, a few people can't keep 7 billion people, can't control 7 billion people if 7 billion people are empowered. They just can't. So they have to keep us basically believing in the American dream. They have to keep us wanting and needing material security and wealth in order to feel safe.
Which they own and supply at will.
Yeah. But if you go and live in a park, or if if you have certain experiences, you come to the realization material security will never make me feel safe. There's a book written by Oliver James called Affluenza, and he went around the world interviewing millionaires, and they're all miserable. Like, it doesn't make you happy. It doesn't make you fulfilled. Material things. George Harrison said the best thing about being a Beatle is that I discovered very young that money doesn't make you happy. And so the idea that the American dream, the material wealth and success and fame and all those things will fill the hole and make you feel existentially complete. Everyone knows it's a dream, but we still follow it. Absolutely, and the one thing that the status quo, let's just call them the powers that be, the status quo or the powers that be, the one thing they're afraid of is for everyone to get what Jesus and the Buddha and the masters and Rumi and all the masters have said. You are God. You have all power within you. You have all knowledge within you. You have all peace within you. You have all love within you. You don't need anything outside of yourself. That's what every master has said, and that is the only thing that will change the world. Our empowerment to stop following outside authorities, to stop thinking that movements and groups are going to change anything. Yes. The only thing that's going to change anything is our consciousness shifting from powerless consumers who need things outside of themselves to powerful creators. perfect children of the Creator. That's what will
People are
change.
very afraid of this. So, as you said, they've been raised by the state. They listen to the state. It's the nanny, and to move out of it for them would be too drastic a change. Now, for me, what I do is I've always said. Me and Chris only spoke yesterday for the first time, by the way, and we spoke for maybe 10 minutes, and then we decided, listen, let's not talk about much. Let's just go live, and I'll ask you some questions, and we'll have a chat. But we did speak about what I'm going to talk about now, and that was that people are afraid to move out of a state. And for me, what I do is I sacrifice a little bit every time and never totally buy into the system. So instead of me saying, right, I'm just going to give everything up, because I've felt that a few times. This is what we talked about. I mentioned to you, sometimes I think, I should live my life backwards. I've had everything I've had and I should just work towards zero. And for those of you who know me, I've given away my home and contents 5 times in my life. And look at me now. It's like the stuff doesn't, stop coming to me. You never lose. You can't lose in a world that's built like this, as long as you're willing to work hard for yourself or even for somebody else. But in the majority, people don't want to do it. They're raised by the nanny state and they don't want to leave that warm breast, of government. So let me get back to your roots. And let me ask you, if you can answer, how would you describe your upbringing? Familial or the external? But keep this at that early years, because I have another question for a bit later.
Okay, early years, grew up in North London. Mum and dad, they were together till I was 11. I have an older sister, but she was born in Jamaica, so I didn't actually meet her properly. She didn't come over until I was 8. So I was effectively an only child, even though I do have an older sister. And I had a loveless childhood in terms of affection, touching, being told that I'm loved. But my mum and dad loved me in their own way, which was to work their asses off to make sure that I had everything I needed material. Talking about, and I can't blame them. That's what they understood as love. But given what we know now about how much a child needs love and nurturing, I would have to say I had a pretty loveless childhood. And a pretty lonely childhood because I was an only child. I remember mum bought me a cat when I was 6, and I have a joke that basically, if she hadn't bought me that cat, I call myself a borderline sociopath, because if you know the story of sociopaths.
You can stop there if you like. No, go on.
Yeah. No, but it's well known that psychopaths and sociopaths, they torture animals
Yes.
when they're young,
Yeah.
and usually they have very loveless parenting. And they have very bad relationships with one of their parents. So I had all the makings of a sociopath. But my mum bought me a cat when I was 7. And I remember it was the first thing that I had this love relationship, this cuddly, touching relationship with. Yeah. Because my mum never hugged me and my dad never hugged me. They never said, I love you. Good. The opposite, in fact. I wish you'd never been born, I heard many times. Wow. So when I got the cat, it was like, I always remember it as my first real touchy-feely experience of love, and I genuinely think that cat, I think my mum knew. My mum thought, oh my God, I'm raising a sociopath, so she bought me a cat.
Gotcha. Mine was quite the opposite, and sometimes I must admit I've had to hold back, because I claim, listen, I'm very open, I just speak my mind, but I don't, there's tact and etiquette and so on, and you can't just keep speaking. Who do you respect? And for me, I was raised with love. So the point I was making is, sometimes I'm talking to someone and they're telling me about their life, and I'm like, I can't really speak about mine in this environment because I don't know how strong that person is. I had love. I mean, love. There were 5 of us in my house, and all of us swear our mum hugged us equally. We remember nights on the sofa, and I think to myself, okay, I've met women with 1 child, a single parent, or a father. I've met, actually, a couple of men as well, and it's quite hard work. And I've met some with 2 children, and it's quite hard work. But when I think about my mum with 5 children, single, and the love we got, it's amazing. And I think that's what shaped me. I sometimes think, anyone can be like this. All you have to do is, love everybody. And then I think, no, the nurturing. If you don't get it when you're very young, then it's very hard to hold love for yourself and to extend that to others. So what you've done there is admirable, absolutely admirable, because as you stated, there was no love in the very early ages, of formative years, which could have shaped you to be the cat strangler, but instead you decided to love the cat and to grow to be a man to love everybody else. So on growth again, we're all influenced by our surroundings, viewers, be it people or the fixed objective reality. So first of all, who's been influential in your life, and what places have also had influence on you?
Most of my influences are people like Helen Keller, who was Helen Keller. I mean, blind and deaf at 2. Basically, the people who inspire me are people who overcome terrible things by not identifying as victims, taking full responsibility, and making of themselves, legends. I mean, Helen Keller, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, just the greats, Gandhi, just the people who terrible things happened to them. Rosa Parks, Aung San Suu Kyi, Frederick Douglass, just,
Andy off my list, by the way. It was too racist for me.
Viktor Frankl. Who was?
Gandhi.
I know.
I've said our heroes really learned. So I don't, for the change that happened, and let's just go on this for the moment. We're trying to keep things very positive here at the same time. But he was, the British have made films about him. They talk about him. They hold him as a hero. So all the stories I've heard about him working with the British to me seem true. If you work that,
he was a blatant racist. He was a blatant racist. But at the same, I've got an interesting take on racism. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me at all.
I fight anyone if I have to, but other than that, I'm like, people are racist. You can't legislate racism away, neither.
Exactly. You can't legislate morality, and I've converted at least 3 racists in my life, like people who are overtly racist, and just by talking to them over a period of time, they've just said, do you know what? I was a racist, but I'm not anymore. Like literally, because the worst thing you can do to a racist, the worst thing you can do is call them a racist. I know the whole progressive identity politics thing. Yeah. It's always trying to call out racism and all this. First thing I have to say about that is, compared to what our parents went through in the 60s and 70s, oh my God.
Tell me about
what young people complain about now as racism, they haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
England is the least racist country in Europe, and it's as least racist as it's ever been. So I don't want to hear you complaining about racism. Racism is nothing compared to how it used to be.
I talk about racism in England, but once people get to know me, it's not about, that it's just like in your face overt racism. It's the people who keep claiming that they're not racist. You can't just wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm not racist, or I'm not a sexist, or I'm not homophobic. I talked about this in yesterday's show, actually, and I said, I'm not homophobic, but the way the mind works, when you learn something, typically as human beings, the first thing we learn is what we hold as our truth. Now, after that, anything else, we try to, it's in competition with this. Like, I grew up to be homophobic. I never was, to be honest. I always thought it was odd. People would ask me if I was gay and so on. And that was the first thing. Television, everything, think of any 70s comedian. It's all gay jokes and so on, movies, all the way through. So for me, homosexuality was supposed to be bad. But I just made new routes to, this, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But because that was my very first experience, it's still in there. I used to think you could get rid of ideas and thoughts, but it's like, no, they're still in there. But as long as you keep on building loads of other positive things around it.
Neural pathways.
But I talked about it yesterday, synapses and dendrites and so on. Okay, so you know all this. Then I said, whenever someone mentions homosexuality, instead of it taking that negative route, it's got like a million other routes it can take, which are all the new and positive routes. And I see the same with racism. So this is what I try to express to people. They've never, ever paid much heed to racism. All they've said is, I'm not racist. And sometimes I just want to challenge them and say, well, you can't just say you're not, because every time I talk to you about a particular subject where race is concerned, your thoughts, your feelings and so on, it's very, very entrenched in those racist thoughts.
Can I give you my view on it and why I say racism doesn't bother me? It's really that victim thing. So my whole attitude is, because I know it's the most empowering attitude, is that I never blame anyone for anything I'm experiencing. I call it under my skin. Whatever's under my skin belongs to me. I own my feelings. I own my experience. So if somebody calls me a name, somebody calls me a nigger, to me, if that upsets me, that means I'm weak.
exactly the same.
I'm like, I'm not going to let somebody, just because if somebody hates me, that's fine. They're allowed to hate me. Why do they have to like me? Oh, wow. It's like, why should everybody have to like you? Yeah. If somebody's sexist, racist, then let them be. Obviously, it's different if they have power over you and they can stop you getting a house or a job. That's where, I agree, civil rights, everyone should have equal rights. And I'm 100% with that. But when it comes to trying to legislate morality, make people nice, that's bullshit. It's just bullshit. Just let people be how they are and make sure that you are not so weak that you cannot control your emotions when they say things you don't like. Yeah, so no racist is ever going to upset me because I own my shit.
I used to, and I still
used to, yeah.
If I want to. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm a male, and it's not being that all males just do. I know how to fight and so on. And if the situation presents itself, and I fancy, a bit of a rough and tumble, and someone's going to. But the issue I had with it was, I don't care what people think. I always used to say it with that tone. I don't care what people think. I mean, I can't control what people think. And my friends would back me up from this since we were 18, 19-year-olds. We'd be out, there'd be 10 of us. 5 of the guys were like the toughest guys in the area or whatever. And they go, Cedric, did that guy just say something to you? Or or no, racist? I go, it don't matter. And I prevented a million fights. Or just... not that I ignore it, that I got this weight on my shoulder, I didn't hear that. I'm like, okay, I heard it, let me take it in. I've heard that a million times. That joke's not even funny, blah, blah, blah. Or it doesn't mean anything, they're words. There's something you have to deal with. But I've managed to maintain a little bit of violence, which I'll never let go, which I mean is that I won't let someone stand in my path through racism to stop me, walking along.
That's different. That is different. I mean, the old saying, basically, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That's what it is. If it's physical violence, that is one thing. Yeah. But if it's names, if it's words, come on, guys.
See, I'm very much the same. And even on Facebook, people know me really well. No, because some people say to me on Facebook and sometimes, "Oh, you was angry," and I'm saying, "No, I wasn't. I was typing." In an angry mode sometimes because you guys just bite every time. And I don't go out just trolling. But what I do is sometimes I'll write, I had a really good day today, and people don't go, oh God, you're really happy. They just get a few likes. I'll write about the positive things or a project I'm working on and no one says anything more. But as soon as I say something which is like a satirical observation, about something negative, oh, you got up on the wrong side of bed or you're in a bad mood, and they come down. And it's almost as if people are looking for flaws in us. And it makes them feel more human because we don't communicate about our weaknesses. We always talk about, hey, look, I'm having a good time, I'm happy, and so on, and everyone thinks everyone else is happy. So we don't communicate about those weaknesses, and everyone thinks that they're weak and no one else is. And for me, I show my weaknesses, and go on. When people buy it, I either just let it flow and turn it into a joke, which is good. For this is like turning the racist into non-racist. Like, oh, you're different to what I thought, and blah blah blah, and you become friends. Or they'll just keep on because you won't buy it, and then they're suffering, and hopefully they mature. But by the way, let me just go back, and this will be the last one because we have to move on. On racism, you said you've converted 3 people at least in your life. Why so low a number?
Good one, you got me.
At least 100 people, I reckon, easily much more than that.
3 that I know of, Cedric. 3 that I know of. I'm sure there's been thousands that I don't know.
Absolutely, for sure. And on that again, not about the people, but when I was young, I went to rock concerts. The only blackface. I just done everything because I said none of this is going to bother me. I know it's there, but I'm not going to walk around thinking the world's a shit place because of it. Because it's there, whether I'm happy or whether I'm sad, and I just take the happy road. So okay.
And also, fear attracts. So if you, I was like, there's 2 black kids at my school, and I worked for the Daily Telegraph. 3 black people in a sales floor of 150. If you go around afraid, predators, people who want to bully you and exploit you, will be attracted to you. Absolutely. If you go around confident, they'll steer clear.
And that happens in all aspects, whether you're the homosexual, the female in an all-male environment, and so on. As soon as you show fear, boom, they'll jump on you. So, This is going to sound lax. I wanted this to be a bit of a surprise for me and the viewers as well. I've done no research. Sorry, I have to look over at the viewers. I've done no research on your current, on Chris's current project, and that's simply because I wanted to find out for the first time, along with the viewers, what it is you're doing now, how they can get in contact with you, see the work you're doing, and where to find you. You don't have to go into really granular details. I'll post all the links up afterwards, but you can talk about those as well if you wish.
Okay, so at the end of that 17-year journey that included the park and then the leg, my business, my flat, my relationship crashed and burned when I was living in Totnes. Had to come back to London, had to come and live with my mum, tail between my legs, had to build my life up again. And I got a job as a support worker for autistic teenage boys. And I quickly discovered in that job that autistic teenage boys are like horses. When I learned to ride on the horse caravan, I realized that horses can kind of tell what your internal state is like. So if your mind is chaotic and your emotions are chaotic, the horse will pick up on it. So I had to learn on the caravan to calm myself so that the horse was calm. And then I realized when I was looking after these autistic boys, it was the same thing. I had to learn to calm my mind and calm my emotions in order to be a good support worker. Because if I didn't, it would trigger them and they would have fits. They would have, they would be really hard to control. And so I developed these practices based on the previous 16 years. I've done a lot of meditation. I've done a lot of vision quest. I've done a lot of fasting. I've done a lot of spiritual practices and spiritual seeking. And I took the best of those practices and I started to do them in the field while I was with the boys. And I refined them and I improved them and I developed these daily practices which allowed me to be a really good support worker who, that the boys really responded to. And when I did that, I realized that I reclaimed the wise guru that I found in the park and after I lost my leg. And when I say wise guru, I mean quiet mind and untriggerable, like nothing bothers me. So that's what I call the wise guru. It's when your wounded child is chill and happy, and when your monkey mind is chill and happy. Wow. So nothing bothers you, you're always happy, you're always full of love and joy, basically. And by doing these practices, I got that back. But I got it back not in a peak way that peaked and crashed, because that's what happened in the past, but in a way that was sustainable and maintained over time and actually deepened and expanded over time. So the way I say it is that now I feel like I've mastered myself because I've mastered my monkey mind. I can just make my mind quiet whenever I want, and I've mastered my emotions. That if I do get triggered, it lasts for a couple of seconds. I know how to calm myself and it's gone. Excellent. So I never get caught up in my emotions and I never get caught up in my mind. And so what I've done is I've put all my practices together into something called the 21 Habit Practices of Self-Mastery. And I'm teaching them to people in something called Practice University. I have to say, I want to say that, because everyone always said this, I'm not a guru, I'm not enlightened, I am not enlightening anyone or anything like that. I'm a teacher who teaches practices. You do the work. You do the practices, and the practices will help you, will teach you the habits of self-mastery. So it's you doing it, not me. All I do is teach you. I'm like a guitar teacher or a piano teacher. I teach you how to use the instrument and you do the work.
Very refreshing, Chris, because once again, as you said, those terms, I've seen them bandied around and people, and I talk a little harder at times, obviously I have to be discerning for the viewers, but at times I just say, these are guys just looking for a shag, the massage guru guys, and all that, and, as I said, I extend my love to everybody, but there's a joke to be had there, and they're gurus. And I'm like, 24 years old, man. It's like, what do you know? You went to India for 6 months and so on. Yeah. And some people think I'm being too hard sometimes. Oh, you're just being hard. Because I always refer to them as either the New Ages or the hippies. But I don't target people individually. And people who know me, and even those who are learning to know me, know I don't hate, really. So those, if I can point at a group, sometimes it's easy. You're not targeting anyone specific, and if you feel that you belong to that group and the negative aspect of the group, then it's that person's loss often. I'll say something like, hippies out, go to India for 3 months, come back with a bindi, and someone's like, ooh, and they start fighting you, and it's like, what have you got to fight me about me talking about a group of people that I've experienced And that happens often as well, and I have to defend that and say, you can't tell me about my experience. I should be allowed to talk freely, really. And if I said, I don't like fat men, I'm allowed not to like fat men. You can't tell me that I'm, ist and so on. But going back to yours, sorry, I've interrupted your your end piece. So where can people find you?
On my Facebook page, Chris Paradox Life Practice University. That's my page, or my timeline, Chris Paradox. So if you search Chris Paradox on Facebook, you'll get my page and my timeline, and it's pinned to the top of the page, the video with the link, with all the links.
Superb. Well, I think I can end it on that note. Is there anything that you want to go out on, Chris, of your own?
Yes, there is. There is. The key to happiness and fulfillment is this: the world will never make you happy. The world will never fulfill you. Money, wealth, fame, status, the perfect girlfriend, the perfect boyfriend, the perfect marriage, the perfect house, the perfect everything. Those things don't exist. You will never be fulfilled by anything outside of yourself. The thing that you want, the thing that you really want, the thing that will make you feel fulfilled and at peace is you. It's your true self. That's what you're missing. So stop looking outside for it. Look within. If you don't go within, you go without.
Superb. And on that note, thank you very much for coming, Chris, and thank you for getting in contact and doing this for us. And hopefully we'll speak in the near future. And who knows, you can Chris may come on the future show because there's so much to talk about. And tonight we just got a very, very little part of this amazing man. So on that note, Chris, thank you very much. And
thanks for having me, Cedric.
You're welcome. Anytime, can I ask you to hang up, please?
I will. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Let's see if I can do this. There we go.
That was the amazing Chris Paradox. I hope you enjoyed him. He's an amazing man, and he's got a lot to say. He's a very strong man, a very driven man, and he's not driven by money. That's the most beautiful thing about it. He's driven by improving himself and helping to improve others. Not bad, eh? So, let me get back to us. Hello, Betsy Boogaloo, Benjamin, Chris, Lydia. I saw this amazing photo.
We are today, where I talk out against drugs.
Oh, where are we? Let's find this. Inizio? No, that doesn't work neither. What about that? No, that doesn't do it. Oh, that one. Okay.
We are today.
Fantastic photo set up. I think I can find it somewhere. I'm back to the mirth. Yeah, Brenda, I like your story. I'm going to have to hear it one day. Sorry, as I said, me and Chris were engaged there. He couldn't see what you were posting in, and I wasn't focusing on it enough to ask him those questions. Chris talks at length. And I thought if I could ask him like 7 or 8 questions, it would take up, enough time. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware that people were thirsty or able to take more. I wanted the show to last around about an hour maybe. So maybe I'll call him on again in the future, and I'll ask in advance for regular viewers if you want to ask any particular question, and we can put those questions to him. Well, I was just going to talk about an art exhibition which has taken place in Essex in Southend, and I can't find the image. I've got another technical error here. But anyway, the image evoked lots of memories for me. It was a black and white, beautiful, high contrast image of a laundrette, simply a laundrette with the dryer doors on the right-hand side and the washing machine doors on the left-hand side open. And it was taken by Phil Stallam. He's in the room right now. The chat room, that is. And he's got an exhibition which is on currently. Let me just go back to laundrettes. The laundrettes, when I saw the image of the laundrette, it invoked a lot of memories for me, because laundrettes, for us poorer working class at the time, and people didn't have washing machines in general really at home, you'd go to the laundrette and there was a kind of ambience to them. There was that smell of the cleaning fluids that they used to clean the dryers with. and then there was all the locals, and we had 5 in our family. So Mum would give us these bags and have to go down, 2 or 3 of us, to the laundrette and sit in there, because like people used to steal clothes sometimes apparently, so we weren't allowed to leave the laundrette. We were kids, you know what it's like, but the laundry was a trip. But because it became part of your life, you've done it so often, it was just a thing you've done after a while. It's laundry day, Saturday, you go down there and sit in there all day. Mum would give you extra money, by the way, because whoever took the laundry, because you was in there for an hour and a half or whatever it was in those days, you'd get enough money for a bag of crisp and a sweet of some sort. Anyway, the photograph that brought all that magic back was done by Phil Stallam. He's got an exhibition called Footsteps at the Beecroft Art Gallery, which is in Victoria Avenue in Southend-on-Sea. It's the same building as the old library, and the gallery is open from Tuesday to Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And the exhibition is actually on until February 2020. If I made any mistakes there, Phil, do jump in and let us know. He doesn't have his own website, but you can see his work at southendmuseums.co.uk/exhibitions/footsteps. That's a lot to remember, so I'm going to say it a few times. If you are interested in fantastic photos, Southend Museums co.uk exhibitions footsteps. And a good way to remember that is Southend Museums British website is an exhibitions and footsteps. So photos actually manage to capture a moment in time always, as we know, and time is simply change. It isn't the clock. Clock is simply a measurement of time. It's not a time itself, and we shouldn't live by the clock, if we want to be free. So let me go and answer some of these comments. He is a knowledgeable man indeed, Martin. Let me back up a bit. Phil, thanks so much for the detail, by the way. Sorry I did click like on a couple of things, but I typed a few times and I thought it was really, really important, but it was hard for me to break off. So Phil Pounder, Martin Gray, too many people from some... that was it, because I had to reply to Martin. Too many people are suffering from something that isn't happening to them. And it's simple words, but a lot of people don't get that. Phil said, existentialist angst. Yep. Carl, this is great. Thank you, Carl, for saying that. Really, it's inspiring. Brenda, I was a victim, picked myself up or survived, they would have won. Well done. And when people hear that and they hear that other people have achieved it, then they know that it's possible for them as well. And it's inspiring to see that. Sorry, Kevin, missed your question. Oh, Southend, near me. Right, Martin, lovely vibe, echoes my own beliefs. Yeah, Martin's got those beliefs, holds on to them, and he puts them into simple terms as well. Quite refreshing and nice to talk to Martin, by the way. Hello, Richard. Hello, Antonella. And that was inspiring. So, talking about time, and I talked earlier about going through the year. I've got to stress to people: don't compartmentalise your life into years, weeks, months, and days. And that's where you set yourself free. I live continuously, and I have done for a long time. When I've taken jobs on, obviously I have to do the 9 to 5, but I'm always late. I'm a tardy employee, I'm just don't employ me. But don't live for your age. Don't live by the clock. And some of you might find it a bit difficult to grasp at first because, we think there's no option outside of a 9 to 5, but it's part of the indoctrination that we had. So we have to break the mould and think differently and find a way to survive without being a slave to corporations or, the businesses that we work for. And, excuse me, if you live continuously, then you truly have freedom, save for when your body actually gets ancient and you can't no longer function. But up until that point, you'll always have a healthy mind and a healthy attitude simply because you will have set your mind free of the constraints of the clock. And by continuous, what I mean is rather than saying, 2020, I'm going to achieve all my aims next year, and then the year passes and you haven't quite reached your goal, and then you feel like you failed because you put yourself within a 1 year constraint, you've compartmentalised your life. If you just forget it and you just flow and you keep going, it could be a year, 2 years, 3 years pass before you realise your dream. But you've still made it, but you didn't have those constraints that you put on yourself. And sometimes we work by time limits, but what happens if you try to free yourself and try to build something, you realise those time limits don't truly exist. You just live continuously. And what the luxuries that has allowed me is that I wake when I want, I work until I want, I rest when I want, you know, and that to me is the greatest freedom. And when people say, well, you're not free, you're still living in the system, I say, well, it bloody feels like I'm free, and that's all I need to know. The only time I don't feel free, and this is my hate for constitutions like the police and that, is that sometimes I just feel really free, and I'm the freest man in the world. I'm living continuously. I don't need to watch a clock. If I just want to stop, I'll stop for the day. I don't have to pretend I'm working because my boss is looking or something, and I'm just going down the road, minding my own business, and suddenly some thugs pull up in a car. Where you going, mate? And it's the police. And they're the only people that really have ever interrupted my life or continue to, and this is why I really see them as criminals with badges. They're the only people that encroach on your freedom in most countries. Where are you going? What are you doing? What's that you've got? Just other human beings coming up to you and, you know, feeling they've got the power to ask you questions. You don't have to talk to them anyway. I posted a rather provocative video up on my Facebook this week, and I didn't do it for that. I did it because of my beliefs, and I wanted to hear what other people had to say. And it seems the majority still believe in their indoctrination. The video was of a young man who challenged a policeman who asked him to take his mask off. We don't know what his mask was like, but he said it was cold, and then his son had one on, so I believe it was covering hair at least. And people were saying things like, "Oh well, you know, kids get robbed from outside the school and that." And I'm thinking, this guy even asked some people nearby, you know, if they were worried about him wearing a mask. He wasn't. The person who made the accusation against him didn't repeat their accusation or withheld it, which means that, you know, there's no charge to stand. So it was an exercise really in seeing how people react to a common situation, and the majority still believe that the policeman has the power to walk up to someone who's not breaking the law, who's not doing anything, who has no charges set against him, and keep that man detained there and waste his time, when in fact it came to a point quite quickly in that altercation where the policeman had nothing to do or nothing to say. But now he was kind of angry that this man was talking to him with attitude, and as Chris just said, attitude's the only thing you've got. And when a policeman comes and tells you you can't have attitude, no, that doesn't sit well with me. So going back to the time, you know, people kind of set themselves a goal like a year, as I said, and if they don't achieve it, they've failed. But as I say, keep on rolling over and rolling over and rolling over until it happens. And by the way, all of the transactions that we do live by are financial. So we have to break out of their cycles, you know, time and clock cycles, and set ourselves free. So it's been a long one today, and I'm pretty tired, to be honest. I haven't eaten. I'm flagging. I'll split this up into smaller videos for YouTube because people seem to be a bit overwhelmed by hour-long videos. And I still have much more to say, but I'll be back in a week with a show, and I'll be here again for the usual Sunday shenanigans. Until then, stay free. I'm the OBG.
I don't think people really know the true hypnotic power of television. You know, how it pulls us in and just keeps telling us to consume, buy, and tells us to hate each other and separates us and causes the greatest divides, all under the name of entertainment. And every time I turn on my TV, it's just like no surprise. It's all of those programs and they're pushing out lies. And in between there's the adverts, and they do it again, and they're trying to convince us that we're friends and have us trained like good little soldiers. 1, 2, 3, 4.
They say we're going to spend $1 trillion this Christmas, believe it or not.
Watch it again in slow motion. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be. Or doctors. Watch it again in slow motion. Watch it again in slow motion. Watch it again in slow motion.